Sweden's investigation into the Nord Stream gas leak confirms the pipelines were sabotaged after traces of explosives were found.
As COP27 approaches its end, diplomats have not come to an agreement on climate disaster reparations for those most impacted by global warming.
Winter has begun in Ukraine with dropping temperatures, just as 10 million people are without electricity in the latest Russian bombardment.
The blasts that caused leaks of gas from the Nord Stream pipelines were an act of sabotage. That's the finding of a preliminary investigation by Swedish prosecutors. In September, 4 explosions ripped through pipelines 1 and 2, sending flows of gas to the surface of the Baltic Sea. It happened in international waters, but in the economic interest zones of Sweden and Denmark. The two countries increased naval patrols in the area and launched parallel investigations. The 2 pipelines were out of service at the time, but still contained quantities of gas. The pipelines through which Europe gets much of its gas has been at the centre of tensions between Russia and the West. Moscow's decision to stop gas supplies was allegedly in response to EU sanctions over its invasion of Ukraine.
With less than 24 hours to go until the end of COP27 in Egypt, diplomats say they are far from reaching the agreement on climate disaster reparations. Many in the global south have been calling for funding to offset the devastation caused by global warming.
To establish a loss and damage fund, we are out of time and we're out of money and we're out of patience. We must establish at this COP27 a loss and damage finance facility. The establishment of a loss and damage fund will determine the success or failure of our collective leadership here.
Welcomed with a round of applause by Brazilian climate activists, their country's president-elect has called for a restructuring of the UN, arguing that it is biased.
The UN needs to change. The UN cannot just stay on the side of the countries that won World War II. We need to have African countries in the Security Council, South American countries, Asian countries.
Richer nations had previously agreed to give 100 billion euros a year to the global south, a commitment they never kept. And the EU has now proposed a much smaller 1 billion euros for African nations.
The most vulnerable countries urgently need this money, and if we get bogged down in endless discussions about the form in which this should take, that, I believe, would not be doing them a favour.
Timmermans added that the fund could take several years before it could become effective, but solutions need to be faster, even if they fall short of the demands by climate activists.
Around 10 million people in Ukraine are without electricity just as winter sets in. The fresh wave of intense Russian bombardments have targeted crucial power supplies and residential areas. It's reported that at least 7 people were killed. The consequences of another missile attack against Ukraine continues all day. Again, there have been emergency power outages in addition to planned ones. As of now, more than 10 million Ukrainians are without electricity. With dropping temperatures and snow falling in Kyiv, residents are now living without heating. However, some in the capital continue to be defiant despite the challenging situation. I know that the power of belief in us is so strong that we will survive it. We will overcome it. We can feel it. It's foolish to deny that we can't feel it, and it's foolish to deny threats that the colder it will get, the greater the risks that the winter in Kyiv will be. To put it mildly, it's difficult, but there's no doubt we will overcome it. The Kremlin blames the suffering of civilians on Kyiv's refusal to negotiate. Over in Kherson, residents are slowly adjusting to their new lives without the Russian military. We managed to carry on for many months, almost 9 months. I think we will live through the winter. The main thing is to get the electricity back. Meanwhile, the International Atomic Energy Agency has passed a third resolution, calling on the Kremlin to immediately cease all actions at the Ukrainian nuclear facilities. Strikes have fallen close to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant several times since February, with Russia and Ukraine blaming each other.
Investigations are underway to get to the bottom of how a stray missile landed in Polish territory earlier this week. But in the eyes of the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, there is only one party responsible for the incident.
Whatever its final conclusion, we already know the party ultimately responsible for this tragic incident: Russia.
Preliminary investigations in Warsaw point to Ukrainian air defense systems seeking to combat Russian bombardment. Poland's President Andrzej Duda, who visited the site of the blast on Thursday, said there is nothing to suggest that this was an intentional attack on Poland. He stressed that if Ukrainian officials want to have access to documents and information, they would require a concrete legal basis. 2 people were killed by the blast on Tuesday. Residents here say they are shocked that the war has somehow spilt over. This villager says, "We rather didn't expect this kind of event, even though accidents happen, especially when there is a war 6 kilometers from our village. This kind of accident could happen at any time." Western leaders have moved to calm fears of a dangerous escalation, saying the strike was likely an accident. Experts say the missile was probably a Russian-made S-300, dating back to Ukraine's membership in the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, NATO and the US have firmly supported Poland's assessment that the deadly missile was probably fired by Ukraine.
At least 21 people have been killed and several more injured after a fire broke out in a residential building in the Gaza Strip. Local sources say flames erupted at the Jabalia refugee camp after a gas leak during a birthday celebration. Gaza's Interior Ministry says an initial investigation revealed large amounts of gasoline stored at the site, fueling the blaze that quickly engulfed the building. The Palestinian National Authority has declared a day of mourning in honour of the victims.
In a highly symbolic act, anti-government protesters in Iran have lit fires in the ancestral home of the founder of the Islamic Republic, the late Ayatollah Khomeini. It's not clear how much damage was done to the premises, which is now a museum in Khomeini, south of Tehran. Demonstrations were again widespread during a week in which activists marked the 3-year anniversary of Bloody Aban, a violent crackdown on protests over high fuel prices. A 9-year-old boy was among those killed in recent days. Hundreds have died since protests erupted after the death of a woman in September who was detained by police for allegedly breaking the regime's strict dress code. One of the most eagerly anticipated World Cups in memory begins this Sunday in Qatar. League play around the world is suspended as 32 teams prepare for 64 matches over the course of 29 days. Despite the controversy surrounding Qatar 2022, FIFA President Gianni Infantino believes the tournament will bring people closer.
We shouldn't forget the key message, which is about the unity, about football uniting the world, bringing people together, building bridges. Everyone who loves football, who is part of a team, who is part of fan groups, who is part of cheering, knows that football has this unique magic of bringing people together.
Qatar 2022 will also give football legends Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo a final shot at glory as their illustrious careers come to an end. France's Kylian Mbappe, the star of the last World Cup, could match Brazil's great Pelé in becoming a champion at his first 2 World Cups. Qatar's national team opens the tournament with a match against Ecuador on Sunday.
Excitement building in Doha. The locals have been waiting for this for over 12 years now. Qatar's population is only around the 2 million mark. That is significantly higher now, and we haven't even had kick-off yet. Here where I am in the country's capital, plenty of the buildings are covered in flags of the participating countries and a lot of player murals as well. It has become a bit of a footballing work of art here in Doha. Over 3.5 billion people watched the World Cup back in Russia in 2018. The FIFA president Gianni Infantino saying just last month that he expects around another 1.5 billion to watch this one here in Qatar. There is so much intrigue to see if the smallest ever host nation really can pull it off. Sam Ashu for Euronews in Doha.